For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
Are you really talking about communism, Jack? Or perhaps the empire itself? Always shifting behind the hologram set over the populace, and in every corner of human history, including now. But always with the same modus operandi. Always orchestrated by that wickedness in high places. I mean, it was a manifestation of the empire that took you down, wasn't it, Jack? For you got too close to exposing all the men behind the curtain, not just the Iron Curtain. Nice universal warning, Mr. President. And yes, I'm once again having a conversation with an audio clip.
Did you lose your mind all of a sudden, or was it a slow, gradual process?
But that's no more insane than people not seeing the obvious hologram around them. The hidden in plain sight machinations of the Archons. No more insane than most of the population still buying into false consumer choices and Mithra-worshipping political parties and Gorgon religious leaders and technocrat messiahs. Thinking we live in any sort of kindly republic or fair economic system or even benign Mother Nature.
Okay, let's all be good little automaton droids and believe everything we hear on TV.
The Empire, like all empires, doesn't thrive on dreams and ideals, but the blood sacrifices to Moloch and the existential despair of amnesiac gods. Our history is a lie. Our schools are slaughterhouses of individuality, and our parents were programmed to break our souls once upon a time.
Our fathers were models for God. If our fathers bailed, what does that tell you about God?
Round and round we go, drinking that fucking Ouroboros oil and injecting those Borg enemas. Round and round we go, Jack. As the tripart tractate says, those, however, who are proud because of the desire of ambition, and who love temporary glory, and who forget that it was only for certain periods and times which they have that they were entrusted with power, and for this reason did not acknowledge the Son of God, they will receive judgment for their ignorance and their senselessness, which is suffering.
If more of our so-called leaders would walk the same streets as the people who voted them in, live in the same buildings, eat the same food instead of hiding behind glass and steel and bodyguards, maybe we'd get better leadership and a little more concern for the future.
But you have arrived at the virtual Alexandria because you, like Jack, have started seeing through the hologram. And you know that the Empire cannot be defeated, but it can be dissolved. How is that? The Empire thrives on what is temporal, and thus you must embrace what is lasting, eternal. Those infinite things the serpentine Sethians speak about in the Nag Hammadi library. And you access them with your creativity and thirst for transcendence. And then you push back hard against the Empire's propaganda every second of the tortured day with your acid parody and your unforgiving logic. Nimble and shifting just as fast as the hologram shifts, but standing upon the virtues of the Stoics and Cynics. And embrace the great life of the Mandeans. Loving what makes you feel good and loving those who need to feel good. You are Prometheus unleashed and an Athena breaking out of the head of Zeus to show the multiverse you won't get fooled again.
I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible.
The awakening of any individual is a cosmic event, as Clark Emery said. The awakening of any individual is a cosmic rebellion, I say. And as Philip K. Dick wrote, if God is within each man, then the enemy of man is any top-heavy system claiming a monopoly on truth and dispensing it downward. Why eventually will laws be necessary at all? I foresee a godly anarchy. No authority here on earth will have to tell any man what to do, or even educate him. The logos will do that. Link him up. A truly egalitarian society should result.
How do you fight an idea, especially a new idea?
What kind of government rules your world? We have no government.
Welcome to the end of the world and the empire that never ended. Like Jack, ready to orate those contraband stories and that gnosis that blinds the powers and principalities. Exposes the truth at any cost. Welcome you, so beautiful before they made you forget.
What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
So my father once said to me, you don't choose the things you believe in, they choose you.
Oh, and I believe this is Aeon Gnostic Radio. And I'm sure I'm Miguel Connor, beyond having a conversation with audio clips and martyred presidents. Yes, I believe. I believe this is the desert of the real. I believe this is where we all meet. I think. This is it, huh?
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart, and I want respect.
But I know, oh I know, that you come here to listen to today's most rejected and accepted scholars and provocateurs. In this eternal now, wherever you are, our astral guest is a true seeker warrior who has fought for the awakening of humanity for most of his existence. Like Jack and me, and you right here, right now, as Jesus Jones sang. That is Edward Pandemonium, who returns to the virtual Alexandria to talk about his latest work, The Gospel of Pandemonium. From the Aeon of Set through the Age of Satan and the Aeon of Horus, and on to the misty steps of prehistory. The Gospel of Pandemonium takes a corresponding step forward for every step back, retrieving the keys to the future from the past and encircling all of time in the coils of the dragon.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom!
As you will see in our interview, Edward, like Jack and me, has become a heretic among heretics. That's the price you pay, because the Empire contaminates every movement and system, and even dream in the Kenoma. As Eric Hoffer once said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
As the dialogue with the Savior states, the governors and the administrators possess garments granted only for a time, which do not last. But you, as children of truth, not with these transitory garments are you to clothe yourselves. Rather, I say to you that you will become blessed when you strip yourselves. And as Stephen Heller wrote, anything that causes us to remain attached to earthly things serves to keep us in enslavement to those lower cosmic rulers.
There's only one hell, Princess. The one we live in now.
Believe me, the sooner we're off the planet, the better.
You're waking up, and you're so alive, and so am I. For this summer, part of me was reborn under the fury of Saturn and Jupiter retrograde. And I've become unhinged and Bacchus mad. And more intense in sharing those contraband truths and that gnosis that will dissipate the Empire and make you into the best version of yourself.
As Hemingway said, there is nothing noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self.
Thou and I art one, as Simon Magus said. This is our story, blinding those powers and principalities. It's timeless and in the stars, and it's Bacchus mad. Glad we're walking together, because heresy shouldn't be this much fun. But it just is. It just is. You better have fun. As soon you'll be like the Andrew Garfield character in the movie Under the Silver Lake, when he meets the Music Man, the earthly Yaldabaoth, who explains to him that everything in his life and society has been manufactured to keep him ignorant and sheep-like. Take a listen and have your own conversation with this audio clip.
I don't care what's fashionable or cool. It's all silly and it's all meaningless. I created so many of the things that you care about. The songs that give your life purpose and joy. When you were 15 and rebelling, you were rebelling to my music. Uh-oh. That's one you know. There is no rebellion. There's only me.
I don't believe you.
I am the voice of your generation. Your grandparents, your parents, and all the young people that follow you. Oh, look at you. Everything that you hoped for, that you dreamed about being a part of, is a fabrication. Your art, your writing, your culture is the shell of other men's ambitions, ambitions beyond what you will ever understand.
That's funny to you.
Well, it's a little bit funny, don't you think? Because I wrote this, and I wrote this, and I wrote this.
Stop it.
And I wrote this too.
Stop it! Who's paying you to write these songs? Who's paying you to write these songs?
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined back by Edward Pandemonium, this time to discuss his new and latest book, The Gospel of Pandemonium. How you doing, Edward? And thanks for coming on Aeon Byte again.
Oh, well, thanks for having me back again. I'm doing good.
Good. Truly an honor to have you.
I'm sorry that I still don't have a camera. I suppose at this point I ought to buy one just for your show.
Yes, we certainly should do an Aeon Byte Live, I'm sure, and get some audience questions. I'm sure you'd enjoy that and bat those balls out of the park. But yeah, we'll definitely do it for the future. But here in the present, we are also being joined by the Moondog himself, Vance Sachi. How you doing, Vance?
Oh, I'm right here and doing fine. I didn't want to be left behind, so I'm looking forward to the show.
All right. It's always a good show when Edward is here. With so much gnosis. And this one will be no different because I really enjoyed The Gospel of Pandemonium, as I've enjoyed your past books. So tell us, Edward, tell us the process, or why did you decide to write this book? And it seems this book has brought a lot of change in your life recently.
Yes. Let's see. Let me think. Well, there's two different sections in the book, of course, as you know. One that is a commentary on Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law, and a second section that deals with aspects of Proto-Indo-European religion. And they each have their own backstory. And there's a little bit of a story of how they mesh together, too. So let me think how to frame this. Well, the Thelemic section, which is the one that is probably going to get the most attention from people, came about in November of 2017. I had this, it started out as just a notion to start a group on Facebook exploring the relationship between Set and Horus as sometimes enemies, sometimes partners. And I was dealing with people from the Ordo Templi Orientis at that time, locally. And I just thought that would be an interesting thing to do. And I asked Don Webb, if you're familiar with him. Don Webb, author of Overthrowing the Old Gods. Well, he is a former high priest of the Temple of Set. He wrote this book, Overthrowing the Old Gods, that was on Crowley as well, and has commentaries on the Book of the Law by both himself and Michael Aquino. And he's written both nonfiction initiatory books, and he writes fiction as well. And he's kind of a big deal. So I wrote to him and I asked him if we could use this particular ritual that had been in the earlier version of Overthrowing the Old Gods, which was called the Force and the Fire. And it was called the 11-fold Conjuration of Thelema. And he graciously sent me a copy, and he's actually going to get a lot of credit as we go through this story because he actually helped out a lot in this process. So when he listens to this, I don't know if he's going to want to disavow me or he'll be happy for the plugs, but we'll see. He definitely has to get the credit one way or the other because he was such a tremendous help. Anyway, put the 11-fold conjuration up for the people to use as they would. You know, every Facebook group has files sections and what have you. And then I guess the idea took root with him because he had called for a year of Antiwe among Setians, who Antiwe is the Egyptian god that combines Set and Horus as one. And you'll see Antiwe depicted with the head of both gods on one body. And so that was going on all that year, so in addition to what I had already started doing. And on a personal note, I realized that it was the 18 years had passed since the term Pandemonium had come to me. The tropes and themes of it had always been a part of my life, but then it was in the year 2000 that the actual term came to me, and everything just kind of started to crystallize around it. And as I write in the introduction to the book, Anton LaVey had written in his book, The Satanic Rituals, about cycles of time based on 9 and 18 years. And so I thought that was noteworthy and wanted to do something special for it. And later in the year, I started this 11-fold conjuration of Thelema in April of 2018. And I incorporated also another thing that I had from Don Webb previously, years back, that was a very kind of, I don't know what you would call it, a litany, a spell, I'm not sure, but it was very solipsistic in nature. It had commands like, no magic in any galaxy can occur unless it serves my will, and things like that. So I kind of combined that with the 11-fold conjuration. So I was kind of like taking charge of the material in terms of like my own work and in terms of bringing things forward, because I had been quite active in studying Thelema many years prior. So in a way it was kind of like nostalgia, but in another way it was looking to squeeze some new life out of it and see what happened. And then also, you know, in the years since Crowley, you had the whole Anton LaVey satanic period, and then going into the Temple of Set, and you know, the whole explosion of the left-hand path, for better or worse, in recent years amongst people. And to backtrack again a little bit to 2004, I had been in the Temple of Set for 5 years at that time, and I wanted to mark the occasion. And I had basically done this Pandemonium covenant, which was a kind of Faustian pact that kind of re-manifested an original commitment that I had made in childhood, you know, to my work there and my work personally and in the future and things like that. So then I realized later that it was 100 years from the Book of the Law, 1904 to 2004. And I thought, well, that's a nice little thing, since it's a full century that way. So then last year, when I was redoing all this, I just thought to myself, well, I'll do this thing just as an exercise to see. And it turned out to be much, much more than that. I did the 11-fold conjuration, and after I would do the certain part of the conjuration that was appropriate to that day, I did it over the 3 days of the writing of the Book of the Law, April 8th, 9th, and 10th. I would go and then read that chapter and just jot down my impressions, general impressions. And then later on, I went through and read commentaries by Crowley, by Kenneth Grant, the ones by Aquino and Webb that I mentioned previously. And I jot down my thoughts on those, and all these other things started to come in and tie together. And there was all these like synchronous experiences happening in my life altogether. And I realized that this was bringing out something very, very new, very different, but still the same. In a way, it was like kind of restoring the potency of the book, which was understandably quite shocking in 1904, but perhaps isn't as much so today, just because people are used to it. So in the commentary, I wanted to like really kind of scrub it down to that bare essence, but also make it contemporary, make it relevant to what was going on now and what we could expect to happen in the near future, and to give it that kind of edge again. And then also to bring in the work that had been done by Grant and LaVey, Aquino and Webb, and everyone else all throughout that entire Regency century and collect all of the gold, frankincense, and myrrh together in one place. And I spent time then just further integrating those impressions and making it all into something coherent, and it started to gel together in some really nice ways, some unexpected ways. And then I started sending it to a few people just to see what they thought about it, because I saw that there were things in it that would be of value to some of my colleagues and not just to myself. And so to get back to Don Webb again, after he read it, he sent me a list of questions to answer and then go back and do more revision based on my answers to those questions. And for example, I think the first question was something like, if a book like the Book of the Law could be made to live again, and if it could, what conditions or circumstances would be necessary, what factors would be necessary? And all of the other 4 or 5 questions that he gave me were just as just as easy and superficial as that one is. And yeah, so that took quite a bit of thought, and I can't say that I've entirely answered them yet to my satisfaction. I'll probably still be thinking about them in layers and deeper layers and deepest layers yet for quite some time to come. But it did affect the final work, and so once again, very grateful to Don for his assistance.
Edward, you write that the message of the Book of the Law has been whitewashed and watered down for more than a century, sometimes by Crowley himself. Can you explain this? I mean, you just mentioned that maybe it got dated and old, but it's probably more than that. I mean, has it really gotten watered down? People have forgotten? Or what is your intention with, as you said, bringing some of that energy back?
Well, there's a lot of people within the Crowley camp that watered down the message and tried to make it into a new kind of Wicca, I guess, like an urban Wicca or something like that. And they I tried to put back all the sex, drugs, and social Darwinism that Crowley originally intended, that has been kind of like softened and mellowed out over the course of the last 100 years. But the thing with Crowley too was that he wasn't entirely clear on what he was doing, because he was the guy who brought in that Aeon, but he was not born in that Aeon, so he had to kind of be a convert to his own religion to study his own. It was an adjustment for him as well, and he was involved in various things that maybe were not entirely compatible. He kind of spread himself thin, trying to be the world teacher. He wanted to have this entirely comprehensive, set of teachings, which is, I suppose, admirable in a way. But if he had just kind of really put himself into where his strengths were, I suppose it would have been quite different.
Yeah, in one part, Edward, you write, Crowley laid the foundation for the left-hand path, but he did not clearly establish it. And, well, I guess you can have a foundation, but it's going to be kind of rickety, isn't it? It seems like what you're doing with the Gospel of Pandemonium is not just getting back to basics, but innovating with the times, innovating the work of Crowley and LaVey and Aquino and Grant and all those guys, especially as, we are in the 21st century. We have, there's digital worlds, there's technology, there's things that got overlooked and so forth.
Right. Yeah. This left-hand path, right-hand path terminology, first of all, didn't even exist in the sense that we use it today. So we can't entirely, call Crowley to task for that. But he helped put the ideas out there that we could begin to see that such a thing could exist. And So sometimes, he was very individualistic, and then other times he would vacillate from that because of understandings that he had of Eastern religions that I think were also misunderstandings that a lot of people in the West have about it being an anti-self, anti-consciousness path. But anyhow, so he'd go into that sometimes and leave the left-hand path as we understand it today. But then he'd come back and, but he was the bridge out of like old fashioned magical thinking like Martinism and the Golden Dawn and things like that into something completely new. So it's hardly to his discredit that he wasn't entirely clear on it, because that's the work for other people to come along and refine things and make them more clear and reinvent them for new eras, because even though the basic tropes remain the same, the applications and the means, the technique are always going to be somewhat different, always evolving.
Well said indeed. And you talked about entheogens, and I'm not that familiar with a lot of the rituals and sometimes in occultism again, but are you saying that entheogens are not accepted in a lot of modern occultism or the Temple of Set?
No, not at all.
No. That's unusual. I'm surprised about that one.
Well, yeah, I was, I think I told you, I was actually expelled from the Temple of Set for writing this book.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
If you want to share about that, I mean, when we talked about it and I read your notes, of course, the first thing I thought was thinking of David Chappelle and cancel culture. And I said, sometimes if you're trying to innovate or you're trying to get away from the norm, it doesn't matter what organization you are, there are those who, like some sort of group think Borg, will try to find ways of destroying you or getting you out. It's the strangest thing that's so prevalent today. I mean, do you think that's what happened to you? I think that's what happened to you, especially anybody who's embedded at all on social media.
Yeah, sure. I think it was very much like that, because it wasn't just this particular thing. It delved into like a lot of personal issues. I mean, I couldn't tell you the reason that I was expelled. It wasn't really clearly explained to me. And for that reason, I can't even be that mad at some of the people that voted against me, because I don't know what they were told. And but I don't really want to go into that. What happened though with this book, this particular sticking issue, is that, like, I say right there that the Temple of Set does not approve of this. But then I also say, and it's true, that in ancient times, Set was associated with wine. Other forms of the Prince of Darkness, like Shiva and Odin, are associated with mushrooms and other intoxicants. And in tantric practice, these are a thing. So it's a clearly established part of the left-hand path historically. And that's what I said in the book. And that's what I'm still saying. So.
Yeah, I mean, you were just talking about historical fact. I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, you can look at, there were some Gnostic sects that you can make a very good case that were using entheogens. There were others that didn't. It really is, it's part of religion for centuries. What is the Temple of Set's reason? Do they feel it obscures or clouds your mind or anything? I mean, you're talking to somebody. I've been sober for 20 years, so, well, except for ayahuasca.
That would be the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the gist of it. And I wasn't telling anybody that they should do it. All I said was that this was a thing, and if you were going to do it, be smart about it. There are real problems with it. You can really go off the rails in a variety of different ways. And but that's not any more true of that than any other aspect of black magical practice, I don't think. And one thing that I did mention is that things are changing in the culture too, as these things become increasingly decriminalized and respected, especially in therapy. And I did say that I intended to provide material to therapists, because I feel like psychedelics being amplifiers, essentially, if somebody's going to a therapist with some kind of anti-consciousness ideology or philosophy, as are often associated with these things, through the hippie culture and things like that, then they're going to have those experiences amplified in therapy, and it's going to make them worse. So my thought was like, get out in front of this kind of thing, because I also see it as part of a larger issue, which has to do with technology and things like that, increasing in power and reaching a point where if left-hand path values like individuality and agency and personal volition and choice and things like that are not part of the dominant culture, then these technologies are going to completely snuff out those things. And we're just going to be an ant mound or beehive kind of society. And I see that as a kind of looming existential threat. And in the temple set, there are, kind of founding documents. I would be hesitant to call them scriptures, but I mean, they fulfill that function to a certain degree. Things like the Book of Coming Forth by Night, the Word of Set, things like this. And they talk about an existential crisis that we have to be prepared for in the future. And to my mind, that's it. That kind of thing that I've described. And if there's some kind of, propagandistic, anti-individualist dogma being put forward in therapy, amplified by psychedelic drugs, then that's, only going to hasten that kind of thing, to my mind.
Yeah, I would certainly agree. I think, the fight for the individual just gets more intense. And these are questions people have to ask. And unfortunately, sometimes these things happen. I'm really sorry this happened to you, because I know you were a priest for a long time. You've been involved. And again, I confess here, probably something I haven't confessed, that in 2006, I got kicked out of a Gnostic church. And I don't know, it's what I said, but I think in this situation I probably should have said it more. Obviously, in divorces, even if you say the best thing, you could always do better. And I kind of still look back and wonder if what happened, what could I have done better? But at the end of the day, the bishop just decided that I was no longer welcome, and things worked out really well. I mean, I think in my resentment, Edward, in my resentment and anger, what I did is I started a podcast. So I said, if I can't learn about Gnosticism in this church underneath a Freemason hall, I'm going to go interview scholars. And here I am. So things worked out. And I know what you're doing is important work too. I mean, for example, we recently had Rodney Orpheus, and one of the questions I was asking him, and I thought of your book too, because I was reading your book around when I was interviewing, was the idea how paganism or Gnosticism is all about the powers of nature, or either fighting nature and all that. But some pagans are like, well, forget nature. What about technology? This is the new forest. This is the new jungle. This is the new issue. What do you think of this? The digital world.
I talked about this kind of thing a little bit the first time that I was on your show.
Right.
I quoted Mircea Eliade in The Forge and the Crucible, the Romanian guy, and he said the quote that man, pre-technological man, was buried in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So he was embedded in nature in a way that he was subject to it and buried in it, and technology allowed him to get up above it. But we have things coming up that can cause us to be buried in technology just as much, if not more so. Actually, quite more so. I mean, you're talking about like, actual interventions into brain function and things like that. So it's even more of an issue. And things are coming along in virtual reality and augmented reality that are amazing and will do amazing things, but at the same time, they're the same kind of addiction issues that you have with television and social media and things like that. But it's going to be much more so because the technology itself is so much more engaging. So this is an issue where people have to recultivate their discernment, recultivate their kind of cybernetic piloting of themselves through this media, rather than just being passive to it, as people were back in the days of 3-channel television and so on. And you don't really see that in the culture happening right now. You don't see a lot of movement towards awareness and discernment and conscious curation of your media experience and things like that. So again, I think that's part of it. And one of the reasons I'm so adamant about this is that the convergence of technologies, where the technologies come together synergistically with each other, is going to be so rapid. Everyone is going to be taken by surprise by how rapid it is. And so if it's not handled in the next 10 years, and I mean strongly handled, taking the reins of it, I don't know that there'll be a chance to after that.
And what do you think are some of the solutions? I mean, like me, you're basically libertarian anarchists. You believe let the market do, let people be free. What do you suggest to protect against it? I guess we would both say the inner journey, the fight for the individual, is still the same.
Yeah, it's a question of putting these things out there in the culture. It's good to have organizations where you go in and you pursue initiation and you pursue your own individuation and things like that. But if they're not, if the culture is completely contrary to that, it's not going to matter. It's going to be like a big tsunami, like rolling over you, and there's not going to be a lot you can do about it. It's 20 years of zombie apocalypse movies and TV shows have like put this thing in our subconscious, and it's going to like manifest in that form, I think.
I would agree, and I do like, I'm going to quote a couple of things, because again, your book does have the answers, your book, The Gospel of Pandemonium, to these issues. That's why I'm talking about them, but you quote Stephen Flowers, who lists self-deification, individualism, initiation, which is very important. We're talking about magic and antinomianism as the key elements or components of the left-hand path. But in our last interview, you simplified it so well, and this is something I still hold on to when I'm feeling confused. You said, this is the key: become a superhero, start a club, build a fort.
Oh, right, yeah. That's the explain like I'm 5.
But that explains it right there, the left-hand path.
If you can't explain anything to somebody that's 5 years old, then you don't really have a good grip on it, the idea was. And so that's the Pandemonium concept in a nutshell, the 3 aspects of it. Become a superhero, start a club, and build a fort.
It's brilliant, because there are times, again, when I'm confused, I said, in my mind I go, I'm going to build a nice little tree house outside. This is going to be my space where it's for me, for the people that I can really connect with. And maybe I'm old, but I'll build it for my children. This will be the place where they can explore their imagination. They can explore possibility away from the world. So, and be their own little superhero. So, I really like that.
Right. Well, I did say I was Well, maybe we weren't on the air yet, but I did say I was currently trying to restore an old house.
Yeah. That's your sacred space, if you would, or where your imagination will pour.
I have high hopes for it. We'll see. It's got a lot of room where people that I know around the world can come visit. It's got its own studio apartment attached to it, and a dream that I've always had is that the people that I know in not just occultism but the arts and economics and law, people that work in the tech industry can all just kind of come together and riff on each other in a private environment away from conferences and things like that are usually just noise. And this is smaller than what I'd always imagined, but it's bigger than what I have now. So I'm very hopeful about it.
Good deal. Well, you heard it, audience. Become a superhero, start a club, build a fort. I think that will take you a long way for those of you out there. And maybe tying this or maybe expanding in Pandemonium so the audience can understand this concept, even though we talked about it 4 or 5 years ago, but it's a good refresher. And your book adds more to it. But let me quote you. You see Pandemonium as, quote, a continuum comprising of individual, social, and environmental material dimensions, integrating individuals and their environments in the context of living and becoming. Pandemonium can be as small as 2 people in a single room or as large as the entire universe. At whatever level or scale, it's chaosmic alchemy in a process of upgrading and integrating whole systems, worlds, and worlds within worlds. I really enjoyed that. It gave me a lot, but maybe you can explain this to the audience if you want.
Sure. Wow, it really was 4 years ago, wasn't it? That's
yeah.
Crazy. Well, the Pandemonium concept is, of course, the word itself is Latinized Greek and comes from Paradise Lost. It's the name for the capital city of hell, and it means all demon place, or abode of all demons. And so within the word itself, you have three concepts. There's the demon, or demons, and to the Greeks, the demon was not like the demon in The Exorcist. It was the higher faculty of being, and then you have all the demons, which suggests community and society, and then the place or the abode is the environment. And the idea is that initiation and the progress that you make in your own becoming and transformation can't exist in a vacuum. They have to be integrated into your relationships and also into your environment. And the changes that you make accordingly provide a foundation for further transformation and becoming. So the first part is, initiatory work, psychological work, anything that you really do to improve yourself, to make yourself better, become smarter, stronger, faster, wiser, whatever. There's a million different things you can do. And then you become a new person, essentially. And at that point, you want relationships and interactions with others that facilitate that and reflect that. And that's the hardest part. That part has driven me to despair sometimes. Even admittedly, when I was in the Temple of Set, I met more people that I was compatible with in that way. But even still, I could count them on my fingers. So, but then you also want to make changes to your environment as well, upgrade them. And that happens both on a personal level. All these things happen on both a personal level and a cultural level, an upward spiral, we hope. And then you get feedback from your relationships in your environment, and then you become something more, something new than what you were before. And it just goes on and on and on, like the snake that swallows its tail.
Edward.
Yes.
I have a question. I'm wondering, in this day and age, I clearly see the threat that we face with being, absorbed by all this mechanical stuff, which is, according to standard definitions, a right-hand path stuff where the community is supreme and the individual is minimized. But in order to be effective, you mentioned, I think, and I think someone else on the show, I think maybe Robert Orpheus mentioned this, that people need to get, on the left-hand path, need to get together. For example, the Temple of Set, people of like mind and so forth, who agree that the individual should be empowered. And so does that present a paradox? Because the left-hand path is individualistic. It's kind of like the club of anarchists, where everybody is trying to, do something together in common, but then they have differences. And, I don't understand why they bounced you out. If they're so individualistic and antinomian, all of a sudden we have this law that's being invoked for whatever reason. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, I mean, there's relationships and there's relationships. There's, very clingy kind of mutually defining relationships. And then there's relationships with people who are strong individuals that interact with each other. And, you can see this in two extremes of like a romantic relationship. That's not something that, well, maybe it is. I was going to say it's not occult, but relationships can be pretty occult, I think, sometimes. But you have the couple that like try to merge into each other like some kind of shmoo, and like become like one entity, and it makes everyone ill around them. And then you can have a relationship of two strong, competent people that spark each other in different ways by being strong individualities. And it's the same kind of thing in any relationship.
What about more, though? In other words, that still sounds like a very small number of people, 2 or 3 people. But how about when you start getting organizations like the Council of Nine, who oversees everyone and, makes sure that everybody's towing the line, even though, we're not really for law. But, this always seems to happen, no matter what the good intentions are. Everybody's going to get together and, be, champion the individual. But in order to survive, these organizations, they start becoming like the things they fight. So how do we solve that is the question.
Well, the problem with organizations when that happens is simply that the organization becomes more important to the people than the aims and purposes of the organization.
Yes.
And that is a phenomena that occurs in every type of organization that exists. So I mean, I guess it seems wasteful to me that you had the Church of Satan, for example, and then Michael Aquino had to leave and start the Temple of Set and start all over, and then they bicker back and forth for decades and about the merits of the organization. And now I've left the Temple of Set. I didn't leave, but you know what I mean. And things I'm doing though are not really about an organization. I mean, maybe down the road they will be, but I see the things that I want to do are cultural. They're bigger than that. And I think it's just such a waste of time to talk about this organization, this organization, that. It's not the organizations, it's the ideas and the actions and the mandate that runs through that. And that is something that anybody can access through their own understanding, and more people need to. So that's why, I don't really want to go into a big tangent about my time there and everything, because it doesn't really matter. They'll do what they're doing and I'll do what I'm doing, and they don't really interfere with each other too much, at least not at this point. And so,
yeah, I was more interested in what you're going to do and, how you see yourself in the future. Are you going to put a little organization together of your own, a spin-off, or do you have other maybe more
let me
more
just answer
occult methods?
your question about groups in general. So I'm saying it seems wasteful to me that these groups have to have these dramas and splinter off and that kind of thing. It seems like a waste of resources to me. You would hope that things could just evolve along, but I guess they happen for a reason. And so things get shaken up. That's fine. Things get shaken up, and then it's like you see what happens. Who's standing a year from now, a decade from now, and it's not even really about a competition. It's just about like differentiation. It's about branching, I guess, complexification. I see it more that way. And the book I'm working on now is all left-hand path ideas, but it also talks about law and technology and economics and so on. And it's going to be aimed at completely non-occult people.
Awesome. Well, we certainly look forward to that one as much as I enjoyed this one.
As far as organizations and what have you, I'm working with people privately, both in my magical life and then also in the allies that I have that are not occult people, and I'm much more interested with working with a handful of committed people privately rather than putting up a shingle for some new public endeavor.
But at the same time, Edward, in your chapter on Nuit, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, you say that space is the most important natural element in the left-hand path. Why is that?
Well, because it's how differentiation even happens. The whole purpose of the left-hand path is like saying, this is me, and that over there is not me. So you've introduced space in between them. So, boom, space is the essential precondition of the left-hand path. If we were still in the Elam, the seed, the Big Bang seed, or whatever, and there's no place to go, nothing to look at, just one perspective, one viewpoint, then there can really be no left-hand path, because it comes through dichotomy, through differentiation, and then also space provides the theater for becoming to unfold, and so that's why I think it's the basic element.
Well said indeed, and that reminds me again of something also Stephen Flowers wrote about, which when I read it years ago I was kind of shocked, but he said, the left-hand path is not about integration, not integration with the divine, it is a separation of the divine. And I was like, well, because I always thought, well, in the esoteric, isn't that what we're trying to do? We want to be one with the source. We want to get back to basics and to the foundation of being and all that. But it made sense, because I think that's how you're supposed to start. I mean, Carl Jung talked about individuation, and when you read the Gnostic text, it's not like they took these astral flights to become one with the alien god. No, they went to experience and commune with the alien god, but then to come back and find who they were and what their kismet was and what their role was in this universe. So you would agree with this, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's just a misunderstanding, a simplification. You have the idea of like turning back to the source, which is something I talk about in my work a lot as disidentification, breaking away with your identifications with your thoughts and feelings and your body and your social roles and things like that, to just go back to that core of being. But it's not just to be that undifferentiated being. It's to realize yourself as that. Because in the normal course of daily affairs, you become identified with those other things, like your name and your gender and your age and what you do for a living and your memories and your thoughts and things like that, and you lose track of that essential self. So it's going back in the sense of a realization, but then you're still in the world, you're still doing things, but now you're in a place where you're on top of it all. You can rearrange it as you like, which we call magic. You can make it different, become something new, create something new. And what other purpose would there be to all this except just continuous ongoing, unfolding, branching out, differentiating creation?
Well said. In fact, I was going to ask you, Edward, do you think there's such a thing as an authentic self? And I guess your answer is what you imagined is what will be your authentic self, right? It's the force of imagination that is before you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways, I guess, you could define authentic self, either as that core self that I talked about, or the self that you authentically wanted to become and did through your own intention and action, as opposed to just kind of the drift, what Werner Erhard called the drift. Like, he would say, you're gonna end up somewhere anyway just because of the drift. But if you can take a hold of it, then you can go somewhere on your own intentionally. And you can be something intentionally as opposed to whatever just bits get stuck onto you from outside.
Indeed, and agreed. And in the same chapter on Knew It, you also, it's not the only place where you say this, Edward, but you keep saying bind nothing. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, that's a question that the saying is in the Book of the Law itself, and then in all these commentaries, people try to come up with their own interpretation of what it means, and in my case, that was it. To just because elsewhere it says the word of sin is restriction, so it's kind of like unstrapping everything, letting it loose, and letting it flow.
Love it. And what about you, Vince? I think in the past you have talked about Knew It.
Oh, yeah. Back in '86, I was kind of having a crisis at work. This was just before I moved back east, after I fled Silicon Valley. I came back later, but so I was in my RV, and I drove up Mount Diablo, which is, a big peak. I figured, well, maybe I could, get closer to the powers that be or whatever. And up there, I had an encounter. I could not believe it. It was like having and I have to admit, having been a former Rosicrucian, I was very familiar with Knew It and Egyptian lore and so forth. So it wasn't, the idea of Knew It wasn't strange to me or anything. But I never thought something like this would happen. Basically, it was I'll censor it for the air, an extremely sexual experience. I mean, this goddess, showered so much, well, let's call it love, but it's not like, it wasn't, I'm getting embarrassed, talking in public about it, but it wasn't, the agape love like the Greeks talk about it. It was more the down and dirty type of stuff, and I just couldn't believe it. It was, it was an experience, and I'll never forget it. Don't know what it means. But maybe I do know what it means. Maybe it was a seed for something in the future, but that was my experience of Knew It. Very powerful.
Very cool. And yet, Edward, you write that Knew It basically is the total realm of all that is possible, or all possibility.
Well, Crowley said that in one of his commentaries, yeah, and I agree. That's the thing in the commentary. There's things I don't comment on everything because some things were just handled, and other things aren't relevant to me. So I only really comment on things that are relevant to me, and it's either something that's new, or I want to either strongly agree with a previous commentary or disagree with it. So that was one that was one that Crowley had already talked about. What I always my personal mantra about Nuit and what she represents to me now is, and I put this in the book: all beauty is her flesh, all pleasure is her touch. And I think that's a way that you can access Nuit right now, like in whatever environment you're in. If you find something beautiful or pleasurable, you're looking at Nuit or experiencing the best that she has to offer.
Yeah, very nice. Well said. And yeah. What about, let's talk about another goddess too, since there are many in your book. Can you tell the audience about Hadith? And in the chapter you say it's actually, the chapter on her is very Gnostic and initiatory.
Yes. Hadith is generally considered to be a male principle, whereas Nuit is the feminine principle, and they're the kind of complement to each other. But just to backtrack a minute, that's another thing that I wanted to do with this, is because, you know, in these interpretations of Crowley's text, you have a lot of Kabbalistic riddles and things like that, and I have really no patience for those things, and I don't find them meaningful in any way. And I wanted to put everything back. I wanted to always bring everything back to something practical, something that people could use. And for example, that mantra about Nuit, or saying, or whatever you want to call it, is something that can allow you to connect with Nuit anytime, any place. And all through the commentary, I try to do that, to bring it back to something that can actually be acted upon, something that can be applied. So, but anyhow, Hadith.
And your next book, do you already have a name for it, or is it just sort of you're at the beginning stages? This book that's for everyone is more secular, as you mentioned at the beginning of the interview.
I have a working name for it, but I don't know. I'm not going to say, because I may change it and then it just will sound dumb later on. So we'll see.
Probably better.
But this will hopefully take these ideas into a much more serious arena. You know, because as I said, I do know these people in economics and the tech industry and things like that, and you know, these are not people who are really that interested in the occult, if at all. And it's not necessary that they be, because the ideas are the ideas. They stand on their own. They're, as philosophical principles, they can be applied in the life of any person, regardless of what their religious ideas or aesthetics are. And I think that once this has been put out there, and for the first time these ideas really have their own kind of explanation as a whole culture, a holistic pattern and blueprint, that anybody that resonates with them can rally around, then we can perhaps see some of those changes in the next decade that I said would be necessary.
Yeah, I hope people listen and keep doing what you're doing, but I think we're at the end. Vance, thanks for keeping us company on this odyssey.
Oh, that's been very interesting. I've been listening with great intent.
Wonderful. And Edward, as always, it is great to have you on Aeon Diagnostic Radio, as I say, and always enjoy all the work you put out, and we look forward to having you back on when your new work comes out, and best of luck with everything.
All right, well, thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be here. You know, I think we boost each other's ratings mutually.
Yes, we do. Yes, together in our evil, it gets more powerful. Huh?
Wonderful. Yeah. See, that's that exchange, that interaction that I was talking about.
Yes, exactly. Bingo, bingo. It just feeds off of each other. So, well, awesome. Well, again, good luck, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. The first part of our interview with Edward Pandemonium, based on his gospel and lots of left-hand path stuffy stuff. Are you a heretic among heretics? Are you reforming your ego and the institutions around you under the yoke of the empire? Regardless, certainly become an Aeon Byte Prime member or patron at Patreon for the second part. What will you find? Edward continues to share his experiences with the occult and the Temple of Set, as well as Crowley's usage of Christianity and Gnosticism in his theology, and how the beast dropped the ball concerning the concept of the Aeon. Beyond Hadith, we get into some Babylon and some of our incarnations across history, including ancient Egypt. Edward talks about the difference between white and black magic. And like Rodney Orpheus in our previous show, tells us if he believes in spirits and gods. And much more, including a group share on some of our favorite occult-themed movies. Most of you know how to get the full pandemic dope, with many rewards. If not, message me or just go to thegodabovegod.com for means and the rewards. Let's continue growing this red pill cafeteria, dissipating the hologram of the empire. I hope I have served you, and if you enjoy this content, support instead of wasting shekels on mass media or propaganda art. Do the same with other independent podcasters who are also trying to break down the Black Iron Prison. And if you've got holes in your pockets due to the monkey shines of Archons, just message me. I'd be glad to give you any show on the burning house. We're all in this together, at least those of us waking up, like Jack, now running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Hello and goodbye as always.